Good morning, everyone. This morning, we will be completing a topic that we began last month about the anatomy of the onion and how to peel it. So this time, we'll try to do the actual peeling of it. This is an image that is used by Sri Ramakrishna to refer to what's known in Vedantic philosophy as the Panchakosha doctrine, the doctrine of 5 sheaths. And the idea is that this human body-mind complex is like 5 concentric circles. So the outermost is called the Annamaya Kosha. This is the physical body. And then we have Pranamaya Kosha, which will be the vital body or the life force within this physical body, because it's not just physical like a table or chair or something like that. It has some life to it. Then inside of that is the Manomaya Kosha, which is the sheath of the mind. Then Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the sheath of the intellect, not very different from the mind, but we went through that before, that this will be kind of a distinguishing feature between children and adults and animals and human, that this is that sense of I comes out of this Vijnanamaya Kosha. And then Anandamaya Kosha is the innermost one, the sheath of bliss. And within that 5 concentric circles is the self, capital S, higher self. And what we find when we peel off all of the different layers is that there's nothing specific inside. The Buddhists will say that this is the doctrine of shunyata, emptiness, nothing there. But according to Vedanta, this will be this infinite absolute self. Those who are more devotional will find that God himself or herself dwells within. So this is that doctrine. And there are a lot of other elements to it which we'll go through a little bit. But Sri Ramakrishna uses the illustration of peeling an onion, and I much prefer this idea of the onion because it gives us a sense of the organic, dynamic aspect of this body-mind complex, and how an onion grows and develops, and how the different layers of the onion can be attached to the others, and that interconnectedness. So there's something very helpful about this idea of an onion. On the other hand, this idea of concentric circles, it has a certain philosophical beauty to it also. It doesn't give us that sense of humanness and everything, but it's also helpful from a philosophical point of view. So this morning, I want to go through a little bit of, we'll review first, of the doctrine of the 5 koshas, but then what do we do with this doctrine? If we're really trying to find what is the real nature of the self within, then we have to know how to somehow peel off the layers of the onion. So that'll be a little bit of the focus today. I'm going to begin by quoting something that I read last time. This is Sri Ramakrishna talking about the onion. He says, "If a man knows his own self, he knows other beings and God. What is my ego?" So a lot of this goes back to that self-inquiry question. We're trying to find, who am I? What is my ego? Is it my hand or foot, flesh or blood, muscles or tendons? Ponder deeply, and you will know that there is no such thing as I, that individual ego. As you peel off the skin of an onion, you find it consists only of skin. You cannot find any kernel in it. So in analyzing the ego, it will be found that there is no real entity that you can call I. Such an analysis of the ego convinces one that the ultimate substance is God alone. So it's not that there's nothing inside, but this individual I, this sense of personality, that we won't find there. When egotism drops away, divinity manifests itself. And then the second quote, "If one analyzes oneself, one doesn't find any such thing as I. Take an onion, for instance. First of all, you peel off the red outer skin, then you find thick white skins. Peel these off one after the other, and you won't find anything inside. So this is the way Sri Ramakrishna utilizes this image of the onion. We've all peeled onions, huh? It makes you cry. Yeah, that's not part of the analogy, but anyhow. So he says in another place that the dark outer skin, and we have all different types of onions. Another interesting fact. Some have the brown skin, some have purple, some have yellow, white, all different types, but inside it's all the same onion. So we have the outermost annamaya kosha, and this is the sheath of this physical body. Anna means food, so this is composed of food. Then pranamaya kosha, of the vital forces. Then manomaya kosha, this will be the mind, and the mind is not just that which thinks. This is what, when we perceive anything, that has to appear in the mind. Every thought, everything gets sorted out by the mind. But this vijnanamaya kosha, this is what can do some real reflective thought. And this is where that sense of I comes in, and this is where our sense of responsibility and making decisions and everything comes in, that vijnanamaya kosha. And then the anandamaya kosha, the sheath of bliss. This is a very tricky one. We'll analyze this according to another theory after a while, but bliss, because when the mind becomes quiet, automatically a little bit of that bliss of Brahman will seep through. And we'll see later, this is connected with the dreamless sleep state also, the Anandamaya Kosha. It'll be connected with that. It's also going to be connected with this causal body, so it'll be the subconscious mind also. So when we peel off the conscious elements of the mind, then we get to the subconscious mind. And inside of that, if there is anything inside, that'll be the infinite absolute reality, which we can call the self, we can call Atman, we can call it Brahman, we can even say Ishvara, if we like, that this will be the devotee. We'll say that now we found this is the personal God. There's a very beautiful statement that was made by Ramana Maharshi. Somebody asked him that, do you believe in the personal God? And he says, yes, that which says I is the personal God. So that means all of us, but deep down within the heart. So I emphasize that dynamic aspect and how a child grows. Even when the child grows, in the beginning, there's really just this physical body. So this onion, it kind of grows from the outside in a little bit. It's very complex, but the samskaras and everything will already be there from the inside. In any event, we're going to stick a little bit more to the philosophical side of this. So we can go back more to these circles, and we'll find in Vedanta that this doctrine is used to explain, first of all, the nature of the self. It's used to explain how we function differently in the waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. It's used to explain how we can use our intellect to actively delve into that question, who am I? What is my sense of self-identification? So it's used for that. It can be used also as a meditative technique. What are we doing when we meditate, when we withdraw the mind from the senses, from the outer world? We're peeling off the onion. So in that sense also, and even when this physical body will die, it helps us understand this whole concept of rebirth, because you peel off the outer layer of the onion, and even the next one, you still have the remaining part of the onion. So we'll find there's a very nice application of this doctrine in many different levels and aspects of Vedanta. So I'm going to go through all of them one by one by one. and then we'll finish this topic. So first is something called Vichara Marga, this path of discrimination. And this will bring in several different important ideas. One is this combined concept of upadhi and adhyasa. Upadhi and adhyasa. Upadhi is generally any type of attribute that belongs to a substance. So it can be just color and shape, things like that belong to something in an individual. Can be whatever qualities we have. From the philosophical point of view, an upadhi is an attribute that we think belongs to something but doesn't really belong to it. And we superimpose something that doesn't belong to it onto that substance, and that is called adhyasa. So these two things go together very closely. And when we analyze the nature of the self from the philosophical point of view, what we're told is that a certain type of confusion has taken place. And we get lots of nice illustrations. If you're in a train, I think everyone has had this experience, and the train next to you starts going forward, you're feeling like you're going backwards. Huh? Or if it's a full moon night and you see a cloud moving in front of the moon, sometimes it'll seem that the moon is not moving, the cloud is not moving, but the moon is moving. So we're taking this phenomenon of movement that belongs to the cloud, and we attribute it to the moon. And stability, which belongs to the moon, we're attributing to the cloud. Okay? So with regard to the self and with regard to the coverings, especially the mind, we somehow attribute consciousness to the mind. And the mind is an instrument. It's one of the layers, according to this doctrine at least. We attribute consciousness to the mind, and the real self, we attribute all the qualities of our personality. So when I talk about myself, I don't say I'm pure consciousness, I'm pure awareness. We say, no, I'm happy, I'm sad, I hurt, this bothers me, everything. We attribute all of those external things to the mind. So we're taking these upadhis, which don't belong to to consciousness, the real self, and we're superimposing them, and vice versa. So we do it that way. Now, why do we do this? It's an interesting question, huh? We can simply say Maya, huh? We can say Maya. That's not a good answer. Why do we do this? One reason I feel is that consciousness is so empty. There's nothing in it. It's like people who have never had, there are tribes in certain parts of the world that have never seen a mirror, that when they look into a mirror, they'll think it's somebody else, because the mirror itself is perfectly empty. They won't know that there's something that is just reflecting. If one of the illustrations that's used for this adhyasa is if you have a clear crystal vase and you put a red rose behind it, that we get the impression that the redness which belongs to the rose now belongs to the crystal. If we don't know, we just walk in a room and we see it'll look like there's a red vase there. Now, we know that redness doesn't belong to the vase because as soon as we remove the rose, we see that has no color at all. So the mere fact that it's colorless allows it to take on this upadhi, this attribute, redness that belongs to the rose, and for us to think that it belongs to the vase. And yeah, there's one theory why this takes place. Also, from the very beginning, I mentioned this last time, as a small child, mind is going outward. We have no sense of reflection or discrimination when we're young, so naturally we identify with the external things. It's a very natural process. But in any event, this type of analysis is meant for us to question, do these attributes really belong to me, to the self. And when I say me, I really mean the sense of I. So we have these different ways of analyzing that, am I this body? So we'll go through all of the different 5 things. Am I this body? And am I this mind and the senses and everything? In what sense does that explain my feeling of being an individual? Now, we know this curious thing that we've been observing this body from childhood or all the way through lifetime, and it's completely different. It's undergoing all sorts of changes. Our senses go through all sorts of changes. We may lose our sense of sight, our sense of hearing, everything, and we may completely change. We can be in young age that we're just playful little children, then we become teenagers full of anxiety, then we become young people full of confidence, then we become old people, this hurts, that hurts, all of that. But still, I am the same person. I have that feeling that I haven't changed. There's something within me that hasn't changed. This is that analysis that we do. We try to figure out what is the sense of myself as an individual. Because the sense of my own existence is the one thing that I cannot question. I can question everything else. I can question whether anything outside of myself really exists. Is it a hallucination? Is it a dream? Will I wake up and find myself lying in bed and I say, oh, I had a dream, I had a nightmare, I had to speak in public in front of all of these people. So I can question all of these things, but I can't question my own existence. And you can't tell me I don't exist, because we know that we exist in a different way that has nothing to do with these coverings, with these upadhis. I know it. It's just a question of consciousness, and this reflective nature of consciousness. I'm aware that I exist, and we don't require anything else. But naturally, this tendency comes to identify my awareness with my physical existence, to identify my existence with the physical existence, and mostly mental. Our sense of identification is not really with the body. I don't think there's anybody who will say, I am this body. We'll say, I have a body or I dwell within this body, but our sense of identification is with this personality, and this is what we mean by the ego, with our history, with our past, everything. That's what we identify with, and that's what gets us into trouble. And that's what's so sensitive, this ego. And that's what we don't want anybody to fool with, and it gets bruised easily, and it makes us feel separate from other people. All sorts of things come as a result of that. Not just ignorance of our true nature, but our life is made miserable because of the clinging to this ego sense. So this is one type of analysis. Another type is when we make this distinction between seer and seen. We know that. If something can be an object, then my real self is the subject. If something is an object, then it has to be separate from me. If I can observe the mind, then I'm separate from the mind. So this is one type of analysis. If I can be the possessor of something, then I'm different from that. There are all different types of analysis. That if I have a house, then I'm not the house. If I have a body, I'm not the body. If I have a mind, I'm not the mind. If I have an ego, I'm not the ego. And then this idea of the witness, if I can observe that, then I'm something separate from that. So this is all that path of vichara, all different ways. But I think that these are almost not necessary if we're very thoughtful. And we really ask that question, how is it that I feel that I exist? Do I need to explain it by anything else other than just I know that I exist? This is the nature of consciousness. Even if I try to prove to you I don't exist, then this is the most essential elemental thing. You know, there's a French philosopher, Descartes. He was famous for that. I think, therefore I am. That he said, no matter how much I can doubt it, the doubting of it proves the existence of it. Of course, he didn't take it all the way back to the Atman, but still, that same idea. He wanted to found a philosophy on one principle that couldn't be doubted. That was the whole point of this Cartesian philosophy. So it was on my own existence. Everything else I can doubt. I can doubt the reality of anything. I could be imagining all of this. I could be dreaming, hallucinating all of this. But I can't question the one who was having that experience. I can question, am I really in this body? Huh? When we wake up from a dream, we seem to switch from one body to another body. Huh? But this sense of I, that won't change. That's always there. When we come to this idea of the three states of consciousness, I mentioned earlier, this waking state, dream state, and dreamless sleep state, we find that these 5 sheaths get whittled down into 3. And now we have this doctrine of the 3 bodies, sharira. The 3 bodies, what they generally do is they'll take the 2 outer sheaths, annamaya kosha, this body, and the pranamaya kosha, the life force, and they'll call that this gross body, stula sharira. And then the next 2, the mind and the intellect, manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, they'll say is the sukshma sharira, the subtle body, and this anandamaya kosha becomes the causal body, karana sharira. And this is done partly because we want to have 3 things that will correspond to the waking state, the dream state, and the dreamless sleep state. So, in the waking state, this physical body is functioning, and if the outer one is functioning, everything inside functions. This is another part of that doctrine. This is why we have to peel things off from the outside. If you want an onion, you can't peel it from the inside. Huh? You have to do the outer layer first. So everything is functioning. When we're in the waking state, we're also living, we're also thinking, we're feeling, we're experiencing everything, and the subconscious is there. Then, when we get to the dream state, what have we done? We've peeled off. Experientially, we've peeled off this physical body. It's still there, it's still lying in bed, but from an experiential point of view, that's no longer part of the scenario. Now everything is from the subtle body. And when we go to sleep and have no dream, then as if we've peeled off the mental sheaths, right? So then we're simply dwelling in that anandamaya kosha because it's something joyful and blissful, but it's also called the karana sharira because when we wake up, we find that we're the same person that we were before. There's the same memory bank, the same everything is there. So that means it just went into a causal state. Everything was there. Everything that was there in our active mind remains there in some causal form so that it can come right back up. We don't wake up as different people. We wake up as the same person. So going to sleep, as if we're peeling off this outer layer. There was a movie many years ago, 1985, called Cocoon. Did anybody ever see that movie? Huh? A very interesting movie, yeah. Half science fiction and half comedy and everything. Interesting movie. It has a lot of different themes about old age and do we want to be young forever? But it's about these aliens who come to Earth because their planet was being destroyed and the aliens have to grow up in pods, and they deposited all of these pods in the ocean, so now they had to collect them. So they disguised themselves as human beings. So they looked like ordinary human beings, and they had to hire a boat and go out into the ocean and have somebody dive down and get these, they look like big clams or something like that, and then they had a place where they could store them, and then they could take them back to their new planet, something like that, and they could continue. They didn't want to abandon them. They're future people, alien people, like that. So there was they hired a boat, and there was a young boatman there, and these aliens looked just like human beings. And there was one young girl on the boat, not so young, but very, very pretty. And this young boatman, he got a crush on her. Really, you could almost fell in love with her. She's very nice and very, very pretty. So his room was right next to her room, and he saw that there was a keyhole in between, and despite his better instincts, he knew that it wasn't a nice thing to do. He's looking through the keyhole. And he sees her take off her gown, getting ready for going to bed. And the next thing he sees is that she unzips this body and takes off this body, and she's this kind of green alien-looking creature like that. So if we could actually do that, because this is what happens when we go to sleep, as if we're unzipping this and taking this off, and then we're just in the subtle body. If we could do that, then we would have a real understanding how this is not essential to our sense of I. Of course, it's essential to being a human being. We're not denying that, and we can't physically take it off at that time. But my sense of I is not dependent on this physical body. We understand that even better when we analyze the dream state. In the dream state, my sense of I is fully identified with a dream body. And when we wake up from the dream, how, just like that, we travel from that dream body and that dream world into this waking state body and this waking state world. It's amazing. To me, one of the most interesting phenomena is the fact that we don't find it amazing. That we say, oh, it was a dream. We dismiss it. If we really analyze what a strange thing it is, how 1 second we can be flying all over the world, we can be doing anything, very next second we wake up and we're lying in bed. And we don't really question it very much. How is it possible? How does it happen? In the West, generally, this is a general statement, the interest in dreams has been psychological, the content of the dream. But in India, it was always, what are the metaphysical ramifications of this? What do we learn from the fact that my sense of identification is fully invested in a body, which I'll wake up and find out never existed, was imaginary? So we get this very strong conviction that my sense of I is not tied into this physical body. It's equally strong in that dream body. So what about the dreamless sleep state? Now we've peeled off all of the other layers. Is there any awareness in that state? Well, when we wake up, this is at least the theory that we have. When we wake up, there's a feeling that we slept very well. What is the pull of sleep? That there's some comfort, some going back to Brahman, some state where we no worries, no anxiety, but not just a blank, empty state. So the doctrine is that awareness is there, consciousness is there, even though there's no content for consciousness at that moment. I mentioned many times a very nice explanation that we find in one of the letters of Swami Swahananda, when he's talking about the different states of consciousness. We have waking state, dreamless sleep state. There was a fourth. This fourth state is the one that goes beyond all of them. From a meditative point of view, this will be our nirvikalpa samadhi state. So he says that picture somebody in a room with the windows open and the lights on. So the person will be the seer, will be the self. We see everything inside the room, we see everything outside the room. That's our waking state. He says the dream state is picture that the shades are pulled down, the window is closed, so that we can't see anything outside, but we can see everything inside. So because this dream is taking place within this subtle body. And then he says, picture that the shades are pulled down and the lights are turned off in the room. So we can't see anything. Everything is there, but we can't see it. In dreamless sleep state. And then he says, imagine that the shades are pulled down and the light is on, but the room is completely cleared of all the furniture. It's completely empty. this will be that turiya state, that state of samadhi or realization where only the self alone exists at that point. So these three states correspond to these three different bodies, which correspond to these five sheaths. So this is another way of analyzing what is the real nature of the self. Is that which is the witness of all these different stages. What connects it? What makes us feel that I am the same person who I was in the dream? You say, look at the language. I had a dream that I went to India. I had a dream that I went to India. The first I is the dreamer. Second I is the character in the dream. But it's the same. It's not that one is an emanation or a byproduct of the other. It's the same I. 100% identification. So then we have to come to the conclusion that the real I is the witness of all these different states of consciousness. So this is the analysis according to these different states. Now the little footnote, this is just something that interests me. And this goes back to the onion idea, that there's something a little bit too antiseptic about the separation of these three different states and these concentric circles. Because what about the senses? And I always wonder, why is there no Indriya Maya Kosha? Right? Like, did they forget that sheath? Huh? And the senses, where do the senses actually belong in this scenario? We have the body, we have the vital forces, we have the mind and everything. Where do the senses fall in here? Now, Swami Vivekananda, he makes a very nice point. He says that we have this external organ. This will clearly belong to the body, Annamaya Kosha. But it's not just a physical object. It has to have sensation. It has to have cells that can receive and transmit messages and things to the brain, so it'll be part of the pranamaya kosha. And then it's the mind that really perceives. So Swamiji says the real source of the interior organ is the real organ of perception. So it'll somehow span all of them. Now, I mention this because in this dream state and dreamless sleep state, that the senses are not completely cut off. They're muted to a great extent. So that the sense of hearing it's active. It's active. If the deep sleep state, sense of hearing were somehow cut off, we wouldn't hear the alarm. Now, we know there's some people who don't hear the alarm, but that's a different story. And we know that we have different levels of sleep. We have a very deep type of sleep. They call it Rem Sleep, R-E-M, rapid eye movement, very deep. And we see with small children. I remember that when I was really young, I would be so tired I would fall asleep, that my father would have to pick me up and carry me and put me in bed and do all of that, and I would have no recollection of it. Now when we sleep, anybody even touches us, we wake up. Huh? So how children can have such deep sleep sometimes. But the senses are there, and we have different levels of sleep. So as I say, at some time we may not hear the alarm, and another time somebody just touches us, and we will wake up right away. Now, in dream, how the dream is connected to sense experience, this physical sense experience, is also interesting. You know, I'm going to tell the story. This is one of my favorite stories. That when I was, I don't know how old, maybe 12 years old, something like that, I went on vacation with my parents, and we were staying in some place with kind of log cabin things with a tin roof. And I was taking a nap in the afternoon, and I was dreaming that I was playing piano. I used to play piano, and there was a concert. And after the concert, there was applause, and it got louder and louder and louder, the applause, so loud that it woke me up. Now, how was that possible? There was a heavy rainstorm, and it was the sound of the rain beating against the roof that got translated. It went through the physical body, through the senses, entered into the dream, or the sleeping person, and caused me to have that dream with all that noise that kind of woke me up. So the senses are even active then. I had another very strange experience. I was living in a part of Kolkata that was not such a nice area, and sometimes big heaps of garbage would be outside, and in the rainy season especially, it could really smell. So anyhow, I was sleeping one morning, and something woke me up, almost as if somebody pushed me. Something woke me up, and I couldn't figure out for a second what woke me up. Then I realized the smell woke me up. Yeah, it's fascinating, huh? So this is why I like the onion idea. There's an interconnectedness here. Philosophically, we can separate them. They're completely independent states of consciousness, but in actual reality, they're quite closely related, all of these things. And this is why I think this sushupti, the dreamless sleep state, should be the anesthesia state. There's no understanding of anything, with complete blank, or blackout, complete blackout state, where there's no understanding of passage of time, even. We come out of it, and we have no idea if it's been 10 years or 2 seconds. It seems like the very next second, and yet some experience of blackness. I remember the first time I blacked out. If anyone has ever had that experience, they use the term blackout because you experience blackness. It's like in a deep, dark tunnel. So consciousness is there at that time. This gives us that feeling that consciousness is there as the witness throughout all of these different states. Now I want to turn to meditation, because here we get to test this theory. We understand meditation according to Raja Yoga in terms of different types of practices. One, it's called pratyahara, where we try to withdraw the mind from the senses. So basically what we're doing is we're taking off that outer layer, that we're trying to eliminate any sense of ourselves as a perceiving being. So we can sit and forget that we have a body, forget that there are external things. We can focus the mind, dharana, on some internal object to such an extent that, theoretically, that we won't hear noises outside, we won't feel if a breeze is coming, that the senses are basically cut off. So we're peeling off stage by stage, layer by layer, and when we get to the manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, the mind, if we can make the mind still, then basically we've peeled off that kosha also. Now, if we get to the point where the mind is perfectly still, but this vijnanamaya kosha is still there. So the mind is not functioning in any ordinary way, but the sense of I is still there. This will be like our entering into this anandamaya kosha. This is how we'll enter into that there'll still be, this I won't be there in the sense that I have any false identification, but we'll experience the bliss of the anandamaya kosha, because it's closest to the Brahman, closest to the consciousness itself. So with peeling off all of them, and those who enter into that nirvikalpa samadhi state, they even peel off this anandamaya kosha, this causal body, and then that we can't say anything. Then what is. That's that highest state of realization, that we can't even say, I am Brahman, I know who I am. We can't say anything. Then we just exist as we really are. This is that Brahman state. Sri Ramakrishna is very clear that this can't be expressed in words, that type of experience. But we understand that we've gotten to it by peeling off all these different external layers that way. Now, what happens with the actual physical death of the body? Physical death of the body, this physical body, it'll remain there, but a lifeless thing. So the prana leaves. So the pranamaya kosha is there. From our experiential point of view, of course, this physical body, that's also not functioning. Now, what about the senses? We already found that real sense organ is something internal. Now, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a strange phenomenon that many people have reported during what's called this near-death experience. And it's very hard to understand, but there are many who have had the experience that they'll hear the doctor say that the brain has stopped functioning. They'll hear it. They'll hear the doctor say that the life is gone, that it's hopeless, and they'll be able to see themselves as if from above, or sometimes they can hear two doctors talking in the next room, and then as if they can go back into the body after that. So if we understand that the manomaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, these are still there, they're still intact on some level, and that this real sense organ is something internal, we can come up with some type of explanation. Otherwise, it's a guess. We don't really understand it. Scientists like to get around it, and they'll come up with some psychological explanation. But people who have that experience, for them it's very clear. Subtle body has left the physical body, that there's some separation. And, of course, this is how we explain rebirth. People often ask, how does the self leave the body and take another body? The self doesn't go anywhere. It's the subtle body that's leaving. That means that the onion somehow will lose its two outer layers, but everything else is intact. And this subtle body always includes the causal body. Because we can't peel out and eliminate the inner ones without the outer ones. So if we can imagine what takes place, what happens, when we say soul, what do we mean by the soul, the jivatman? Now we mean the subtle body, which is animated by consciousness somehow. Now, do we remain fully conscious the whole time? Of course, this is all speculation, but to remain fully conscious the whole time. And what happens? Now, there's some idea that we'll actually take on another external subtle body, like a dream body, and we'll go to some loka and we'll have some experience. And then there's some other idea that we'll go through some period of forgetfulness, that before we take on another body. Otherwise, if there's conscious awareness the whole time, we'll remember everything. So I mentioned Swami Paramahansa before. He has this theory that there's a year of forgetfulness, you could say. So that means that even the subtle body composed of mind is no longer functioning for us, but the causal body has to be there. And when we take on a new outfit, a new set of clothes, then it'll be the physical body. It'll also be a new mind. But this causal body is there. That means that all the old samskaras, impressions will be there. And what about the memory of the previous lifetime? Theoretically, that should be there, but a little bit inaccessible. Some people we know seem to remember in past lives. Most of us don't. So, but that'll be there. It'll be locked up in some box deep within, and most of us don't have access to that. But these samskaras, these tendencies, and the effects of the memory of the past lifetime, that'll be activated when the onion starts to grow and we start to reach an age where we can develop some sense of identity, self-identity. That will happen. Okay, now I want to stop with what I think is the most important aspect of all of this, because so far everything has been this question of who am I? But if I know who I am, I know who you are. And if I understand that these external things are not essential to who I am as a person, this physical body and other things, then I understand the same thing with regard to the other person. If when I peel off all the layers and I find God dwelling within. Sri Ramakrishna says, you search for this Ami. Ami means I. And what do you find? Tini. you find him. You find God or her. You find God dwelling within. That means that God dwells within each and every person that I come in contact with. Now, there's another interesting point, and I'll go back to the onion again. Onion does not just have 5 layers. It can have lots of them, all different types of onions. So we keep adding layer after layer after layer that has to do with our ethnicity, our culture, the language that we speak, the religion, the political views, everything, that we actually come to identify more with these things than we do with our physical body. And for some people it's very, very strong that you ask who they are, they won't give any other answer. They'll say that I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a born-again Christian, I'm a Hindu. They'll give that type of answer. That's their sense of identification will be more with those things. And we can say they belong to the mind. They do belong to the mind. But in terms of peeling things away, these have to be peeled off first. So these are the things that create distance and separation and make us feel that people are antagonistic to us and enemies to us and everything. If we can understand that beneath the surface, that these are just little disguises, these are external things, beneath that surface, that there's a certain type of oneness. Now, we don't have to go all the way down. We peel off the outer layer of this physical body, okay? So now I understand. It doesn't matter skin color, hair color, the shape of the face, these things, they don't matter. I've already eliminated cultural differences. Those things don't matter. We get to the mind. Now, this mind, everybody's mind is a little different, but manomaya kosha can also mean the heart. And when we get to the heart center, we find that we all share the same dreams and hopes, and we want to have a nice life and raise a family and achieve our goals. Then we see that we're all in the same boat. We don't even have to go down to the self within for this oneness. Just to recognize our common humanity. This will be a great thing if everybody can do that, and common respect for everyone. Now, if we go a little further, then we can find that self within me is the same self within you. Or, again, from this more of a devotional point of view, we find that this I that I was searching for is really God dwelling within. And this is that idea that God is dwelling within each and every being in disguise. In disguise. We don't recognize God dwelling within each and every being. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, not only did he recognize it, he lived in that realm. He very often would say that I see Rama dwelling within all men and Sita within all women. This is just a metaphorical way of that he saw God face to face dwelling within each and every being. He used to say, "Tumi jano or na jano, tumi Ram." Whether you know it or not, doesn't matter. He would say to the men devotees, whether you know it or not, you're Rama. That means that on God alone is the ultimate reality within. The Advaitin will say, okay, really he means the self or Brahman, but he's looking at it that way, that God is the real self within, the Antaryaman, not just the witness, but that source of inspiration, source of joy, and source of love. So this is how we can learn to live in the world like Holy Mother lived in the world. No one was a stranger to her. Everyone is their own. And how Sri Ramakrishna could see God dwelling within all beings, and how Swamiji could develop a whole theory, a whole way of living based on this idea that this is the living God. This is the real God, highest form of worship. He has a beautiful poem called The Living God. I'll just read one line from it. He who is in you and outside you, who works through all hands, who walks on all feet, whose body are all ye, him worship and break all other idols. So for Swamiji, this was the highest type of worship, that not just standing before others in reverence, but serving them. Service of living beings is the highest worship of God. I mentioned before about the attitude that our monks take who work in the hospitals, that the patients, they don't look upon as patients, that these are living God, Narayana. This is service to Narayana. Daridra Narayana, Swamiji coined that term. Special manifestation of God in the poor and those who are suffering and those who are sick. So that even, I haven't seen it, but I know that many of the places once a year they'll actually go and do puja in front of the patients. Just to remind themselves that this is a sacred duty to serve other people that way. And in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, all the visions, everything that he had, all the different types of experience of God, he came to the conclusion at the end of his life that this was the highest. And this is something, when he fell and broke his arm, he said, it was as if Mother was telling me, you've had enough of these visions and losing outer consciousness. Now, see me dwelling within all the beings. Not a lila, this play of God dwelling within all human beings. So when we have this understanding that we can find the real person, the real I, as that divinity within, by peeling away all the external superficial things, then we can feel real love and oneness with all beings, and all the problems of the world, if everyone felt like that, they would disappear. These problems come because of the otherness, the different religion, different culture, different power struggles, all these different things. So these are just some of the different applications we have of this very nice doctrine, that we're covered, surrounded by all of these things that we identify with, and because of that, we don't understand the real divine nature of the self within us and divine nature of the self within all beings. And because of that, we don't feel that deep sense of oneness and reverence for others. If we can develop that, then it'll be a tremendous thing for society and for ourselves also. And this is really what Swamiji wanted to teach. This is what is the basis for all of the social service work that's done in the Ramakrishna order, to see God dwelling within all beings, stand in reverence before those whom we serve, and not look down upon them with pity, but feel that it's a blessing for us to be able to serve them. So we can understand all of these things, yes, through this one very nice analogy of the onion. So I'll stop here. We can sit for a few minutes and think about some of these ideas.